It's showtime. And oh my goodness, James, have we got something special today, haven't we?
I'm a bit nervous for this one. I never get nervous on an episode, but I'm a bit nervous today.
You should always be nervous if you're being questioned by me, not the Spanish Inquisition, the Italian Inquisition. And actually, speaking of Italy, you are in currently with a background from Siracusa, I believe.
Yeah, this is the Hotel Alla Giudecca, which is in Ortigia, Sicily, and just near Siracusa. And actually, this is actually a location. Normally, we run retreats every year. We do about 10 of them, and this is actually one of the locations for a number of retreats we've ran. And it's just a beautiful, as you know, it's like
I love
it's just amazing.
Siracusa, and I love that area of Sicily. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So we're kind of missing. I'm missing. That's normally where I would be this month. Is in Syracuse with lots of amazing 2 weeks of running retreats.
Fantastic. So that's not real. You've just given the game away. We could have pretended you were actually there.
I have. So it's all
We have.
smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors. So today we've got something really special. We are going behind the scenes of James's speaking business because I've been incredibly impressed by James and what he's achieved. And you're going to be impressed too if you don't know him. And if you don't know him, where have you been? But just in case, I'm going to ask the man himself to give us a little introduction of who he is and what he does. Tell us, James.
Well, I am a keynote speaker. I speak on creativity, innovation, and artificial intelligence. I work with clients from lots of different industries. Probably my biggest industries I work with just now are financial services, technology, telco, and consumer packaged goods companies. In 2019, before the world went a little bit crazy, I did about 52 keynotes, I think it was, in 25 countries. So a lot of international travel. Since the pandemic happened, moved very quickly into doing hybrid and doing virtual. And actually, this year, as we're filming this just now in 2021, this is by far my busiest year ever. It's just so it's kind of been a very interesting time. But I don't, as you were going to find out just now, I'm still relatively new into this business. I still consider myself a newbie, I guess, to a certain extent.
Fantastic, wonderful. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. So well done in your introduction, because you told us who you are and what you do. And what's even better, you told us who you do it for. You are totally clear on the companies and the clients that you work with. So already you have shared some of the genius that has made you successful. There's so much I'm going to pull out of you. It's just, oh my God, I can't wait. And James, you are relatively new. And I want to just put also a caveat on what you said. You said 50 gigs, but you charge a pretty high fee. We don't need to reveal that if you don't want to. We don't have to reveal every single thing, because otherwise people can do the maths and know exactly how much you've made. But you do very well. You don't have a low fee. You have a good fee. You're very well positioned. So talk to me as a newbie. Okay, when did you start getting paid to speak? When was that?
So I actually had to go and check. Because I knew we were coming on. I actually went and found my bullet journal, my kind of moleskin journal from about that period, just to see when the deal was done and how all the things happened. So I'm kind of going back into the books here a little bit. But basically, my very first paid in-person speaking engagement was in January 2018. That was the very, very first one. And I think we booked it actually in the October, I seem to remember. I think it was when we booked it in 2017. But as we all know, things are so much quicker now. You get booked in the gigs next week and things. But back then, in the pre-pandemic days, you did often have 6 months before you get booked. So that was my very first one, January 2018.
Wow. So when did we meet? Do you remember? Is that in your journal?
No, well, it'll be in one of them. I think we maybe met in 2019, and
I know exactly where it was. It was at a PSA event, actually, and you spoke before me and I spoke after you. And you really impressed me. You really impressed me, so much so that immediately I said, right, I need to sign you up for the Speaker Bureau. Do you remember?
I do. I remember having a really good conversation at that event, and it was really fun event that as well, because, and we probably will get into this, but I rarely speak in my own country. I mean, probably if I do 2 dates a year in the United Kingdom, which is where I'm based, that would be kind of surprising to me. So most of my things are international. Obviously now with virtual, it's all international. So it kind of felt a little bit nervous, because it felt like speaking for your aunties. speaking to a UK audience. So it's different, really. But I really enjoyed that. It was a really nice event that was organized by the Professional Speakers Association. And that was the other thing, is because I was, also speaking to your peers, like what I do most of the time, which is speaking to, a public audience or, corporate audience or associations. When you speak to your peers, you're also realizing they're not just looking at you in terms of your content, they're looking at you in terms of your delivery. And so, but it was a really nice, very welcoming group of people.
Oh, they're fabulous. That was the London event, and you rocked it. It was absolutely fabulous. So listen, you've actually got a podcast out this week. I know, because I'm subscribed to your podcast and I listen to it, and it's about the question I'm going to ask you now, which is, how did you choose your topic? Because your topic is so important. You want to be known for that one major thing, really, ideally, because otherwise it's very difficult to grow your speaking business. How did you come to choose the topic you chose of creativity, super creativity, in fact?
Yeah, so that interview, that's with great Tamsin Webster, who's got a great book out now called The Red Thread. So just kind of going back, my background before getting into this business, I was a manager of rock stars. That's kind of what I did. And so I was very good at building other people's brands. And I very quickly kind of realized that in the music industry, you have session musicians, and then you have the main artist, the ones that are on the front of the stage. So session musicians, I mean, you always used to be if you weren't that attractive, you were a session musician, because you could be behind the scenes. And then when they took the band out on the road, then they would bring all the nice looking people onto the stage. That's not really so true anymore. But there is a big difference. There's a great documentary called 20 Feet from Stardom, which is this difference of being, if you go to a live show, those people that stand at the back of the stage, maybe the backing singers or the drummer in the band, the session drummer on the band, as opposed to that person that's right at the front of the stage. It's called 20 Feet from Stardom. And it's a big 20 feet. You have to do a lot of things in order to go from that backstage to the front stage. So one of the things that you do, things you notice between session musicians and people who really are known for their thing, is they specialize. Session musicians are great. You can put a session musician in a studio and they will be able to play every style, do kind of everything, kind of sound like anyone. And that's what you want often from a session musician, because they're the most flexible, and that's how they get all the business. But if you want to be the main stage artist, you have to be known for one thing. And so when I decided to start my speaking business, I said, I'm going to have to decide what my one thing is. And for me, I always felt that creativity is that big term was the thing I'm passionate about as a topic. And that kind of stems from seeing people like Edward de Bono. I know we spoke about him on a previous episode as well, a kind of early kind of person. But, the Tony Robbins as well, and people like that. But I love this idea of creativity and how we can unlock the creativity in more people. And I work with so many amazing creative people. I thought, imagine if we could get that level of creativity and that level of inspiration, but from someone that's maybe working customer service backstage, behind the scenes as well. But the thing I quickly figured out, and this was actually Sally Hogshead, I'm going to give her credit for this. Great speaker lives in Florida. And Sally said to me early on, she said, the difference between a creativity speaker and an innovation speaker is $5,000. And she said, you need to figure out, even if your thing is creativity, you need to put a spin on it so it stands out. And for me, the topic I've always been passionate about is around technology, and specifically more recently about artificial intelligence, machine learning. So my spin on creativity is this idea, as you said, super creativity, which is how we can augment our human creativity with exponential technologies like AI, machine learning, robotics, IoT. So it kind of puts me in this kind of Venn diagram of like creativity and kind of technology, future trends stuff, although I'm not a futurist. And that was another thing I kind of learned from a book I read a long, long time ago about branding and positioning, is sometimes you actually have to create your own category. So I decided to create this category of super creativity. And it's quite nice. Now, I saw someone copying me the other day and creating a term. I'm not going to say what the term was, but it's basically the super creativity concept, because they'd seen me do a couple of things. So that's the highest form of compliment, when people start copying your stuff.
Yeah, I think I might know who that is actually, but I love that create your own category. I also love that, the analogy of the session musician and the front man, which is so cool. And I know your passion for AI, so that works so well. And also that point about, the difference between innovation and creativity is absolutely true. I would argue it might be even more than $5,000, the difference actually.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. Now, AI, we've mentioned it a couple of times. What struck me when I saw you speak, you did something I had never seen anybody do before, and it might have been done before, but I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen it. It was at the PSA, and what you did is you used AI to analyze the audience.
Mm.
And you then told us what the AI had told you about us, and you had used that knowledge to prepare your speech. And that for me was a USP. That was, but also it was an aha moment because everything you said, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, there's no way it can be accurate. And you said, oh, you're this sort of age group, and these are your aspirations, these are your values, this is what's important to you, this is what you're going to want from the set. And I'm going, yeah, yeah. I thought, wow, I was blown away by that. And you had me because you were talking about us in the audience. We talked about the audience before you even started sharing anything. So you had my attention. Talk us through about this AI that you use to analyze your audience, because it's cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, the why of that, I guess, comes from I was doing an event yesterday actually for one of my clients, Bell Canada, a telco company, and one of the executives, the sales executives there, said a phrase to me which really resonated to me. He said, "When you work with a client or a customer, you need to show me that you know me. Show me that you know me," which I love this phrase. And so the next level of that, as speakers, we always do like pre-event calls, and we look into the company that we're speaking for, the association, their industry. Every speaker in the world kind of does that or should do that. I wanted to take it a few steps further and use some of the technologies you've probably heard from, like Cambridge Analytica we're using, obviously that's not in a very ethical way, but there's this technology is agnostic and we can use it in different ways. So another one of my clients is IBM, and they had a great piece of technology which actually a British guy on their team called Jeremy Waite first introduced me to. And Jeremy Waite he's almost like a storyteller in residence at IBM, or he teaches storytelling to their executives. And what he did is he actually worked with some of the AI team at IBM, and they found a way using some machine learning technology and using Jungian psychology, basically, in terms of how it categorizes you, to mean that I can go to your social media profile or an association's social media, and then what I can do is I can give that to an artificial intelligence, and it will create a psychometric map of that audience or of that person. So I can immediately see what is important to that person. What their needs, what their values, how they think, what their hot buttons are. And in fact, sometimes if they don't have a social media, really all I need is 1,000 words that someone's spoken or they've written. Maybe they've done an article or done a YouTube video, or they're being interviewed like this. And I just give that to the AI. And it basically creates this psychographic map. So as a speaker, what this allows me to do is rather than just understanding about their industry or their company, I now understand them, or that decision maker in the room, or that audience, in a much deeper level from a psychometric standpoint. So, example here was one I was doing the other day, and this particular audience, they valued trust very highly. So in their case, I'm going to use, probably earlier in my keynote, my presentation, a few more trust indicators than I would necessarily use. So I might mention clients of mine just now, or I might, I got this award. So stuff I wouldn't necessarily use most of the time, but I'm going to use it with them because I can see on their psychometrics, this audience really values trust very highly. So that's kind of how we kind of use this as well. And, this stuff has been getting used by marketers for years, but it's under the hood. You don't see it. And so probably for that audience, that event I spoke to, I basically explained kind of how it worked. People go to my LinkedIn profile. There's an article there that explains kind of how it works. And there's lots of these technologies today that are out there that really helps you understand your audience. And I think also, for me as a speaker, this is useful, but I also think this is really useful if you're an event organizer and you've got a conference coming up, to really understand like what is important to this audience. If I see that this audience really values practicality very highly, then I'm going to want to put in more kind of workshop style things. And then when I speak to my speakers and book my speakers, I'm going to ask them for more actionable, tangible things to come out of their presentations rather than just big blue sky stuff. So that's how we use it. That particular one is I was using from IBM Watson, which is their AI, but there's lots of other ones out there that are available now.
Yeah, no, loved it. That really made an impact with me. So I liked that. And I'm sure there were other speakers using it out there, but you were the one that explained it and showed it to us. You took us under the hood, if you like. You gave it away a bit. So here's the big question. Let's go to the meaty stuff. How did you set your fee when you started speaking, and has it changed now?
Yeah, so what I'm going to tell you now is not what I would necessarily suggest to a speaker. But is what you normally suggest to a speaker now is you put together a rate card and you have it up on your board, and you get very, very good at saying your fee, whatever your fee is, and you get very comfortable with that. I didn't do that. so
you didn't talk to me, see?
I should have known you. I wish I'd known you at the time. So this is what I did. One of the first inquiries we got, it actually wasn't my first speaking engagement, but it happened a few months after my first speaking engagement. But it got booked, I think, around the October or the September of 2017, I guess, was an inquiry from a client, a company in the Middle East. And we went through all the things, said, oh, we heard, we've seen your work, and we'd like to invite you to come and speak at our conference. This, great. And so we went through all the things. And then they said, and what's your fee? I have no idea what my fee is. So I think, let me just get back to you. Let me have a think about it. It kind of stalled for time. And then I reached out to a friend of mine who kind of almost acted as a mentor kind of early on and still now actually in my career as a speaker, called Frederick Haren. He's an amazing speaker. And I said, Frederick, what do I say? And he said, oh, James, it's very, very easy. All you say is, so you think of a number in your head, and usually a high number, and you say, this is my fee, but I'm happy, just pay me whatever you paid last year's keynote speaker. So in my case, I just made up a number, $15,000. I think there's a number I made up, plus flights and all the other things. And I said, so my fee is $15,000 plus flights, plus hotels. But just pay me whatever you paid last year's keynote speaker. Now, I did know that their previous keynote speaker was of a certain caliber, so I wasn't kind of going in completely blind, but I didn't really know. And she came back to me and she said, well, that's fine. Said our previous speaker's fee was $10,000 plus flights and hotels and the visa costs. And would you be happy with that then? And I went, yeah, okay. So my very first speaking fee was $10,000 US, which in hindsight,
good starting point.
Is probably quite a good fee as your first gig.
Yeah, no, great. And actually, I like that piece of advice is to say, what, I'm happy to take what your previous keynote, you paid your previous keynote, which is interesting. And of course, you can find out because you can Google them and go onto Speaker Bureau websites and see the fee ranges, because Speaker Bureaus give fee ranges. So you'll have some idea of where they were at. So that's very interesting.
The previous speaker was Oprah, so that's the problem.
Oh, that would have been so cool, wouldn't it? That would have been amazing. That's brilliant. I like that. And your fee has gone up since, of course, which you don't need to reveal any further, but we know that. But also what's interesting now, I know, is you include your travel in your fee now, which you didn't do at the beginning.
Yeah, and I've kind of gone back and forth. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this, actually. So it depends kind of where you're based. If you want to be more of an international speaker, we had a certain strategy at the start where we really wanted to go for international, make things very easy for customers. So we kind of like figured in, we just kind of put a number around that as well. Another time that you might want to do that is if I'm planning to do quite a lot of speaking in the US market next year. And I used to live in California, used to live in America. So it's a market I actually steered away from early on in my speaking career, but now feels like it's now time to really focus on that as a market. And in that case, what I will do is I will choose probably 3 to 4 months in the year, a period in the spring, period in the fall, and I will basically base myself there. So that means I can then go to bureaus and go to clients and say, my fee is this, and that includes my travel, because I'm already in the market. Where it can become more difficult, let's say if you're an international speaker and having to go and speak in the US or Canada as a market, is they always have to then factor on the flights and things as well. So I just wanted to make it really easy at the start for them. That's just the way that I kind of did it, and things have changed kind of slightly since then as well. But that's certainly the way that I kind of got started, just to make it really easy for them to say yes. Which I guess kind of brings back to kind of strategy as well about certain markets. I had early on, I thought, how can I stand out in a really crowded market? And so I made a decision pretty early on to focus on markets that other speakers were scared to go to. So focus on those markets where, in our case in the UK, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office would put a warning on it, or the State Department in America would put a warning on the country. Now, thing is, most countries that you go to, even those countries they say are dangerous, they're not that dangerous. I grew up in Scotland, and I lived for many years in Glasgow. And Glasgow on a Saturday night, I would argue, is probably more dangerous than Beirut, now. So that's kind of where my mindset, and this allowed me to distinguish myself, because most other speakers are going for the big markets. Most other speakers are going for New York, Orlando, Las Vegas, London, Paris, and I didn't do that. So I made a purposeful outreach to more unusual emerging markets, and that was a strategic decision early on.
Lovely. I love the fact that you thought strategically about your speaking business, because I think a lot of speakers don't, and they don't sort of target, where the kinds of organizations and the kind of territories. I also think it's incredibly brave for you to go international straight off, and not to stick with one territory, it's a lot easier to get known in one territory. But of course, you've chosen certain industries, which makes it easier, and you've niched your topic, which makes it easier. But the international approach, which is a much harder way to go to start off with, why did you think that? Was that because, as you said, speakers don't normally do that, or did you not realize it was harder?
No, I think there was another very selfish reason, is I like travel. I like staying in nice hotels and going to nice places and exploring and meeting interesting people, because for me, my topic is creativity, and core to that for me is travel, being able to explore new places, meet new people, get new ideas, like, oh wow, look at what they're doing here in South Korea. I wonder if we applied that there to that industry or that country there. So for me, it was as much about a lifestyle as being a speaker as anything else. But then I also really recognize, listen, there's so many phenomenal speakers out there, phenomenal speakers on my topic, that I just wanted to go. But most of them all focus on their home market, because it is easier, as you say. If you're based in Las Vegas, you never have to leave Las Vegas, frankly, as a speaker. It's just that easy. And what gave me a little bit of confidence very early on, as I mentioned, Frederick Harron. And Frederick Harron had basically built a career as a global speaker. He is like the global speaker. He focuses on speaking at those big global conferences where you bring everyone together, because they want a speaker who has an international experience. So that's kind of where I focus on, which is probably also the reason why I don't do too much stuff in the UK. Because, I had this strange experience the other day where before all the lockdowns happened, a client booked me to speak to fly to Singapore to speak for their UK audience, primarily this UK grouping. But then they flew a Singaporean, or maybe I think it was maybe a Malaysian speaker to London to speak to their Singaporean. It just didn't make any sense to me, because it was a hybrid type of event. But it does go to something that I often stress to my members at Speak As You, is this idea of the alien advantage. That's a term that first taught to me by Manoj Vasudevan, who's the #1 Toastmaster, like last year, like a great public speaker, a phenomenal speaker. And he said he never gets booked in India. So he's Indian, never gets booked in India. He gets booked all over the world, because he feels in his own country, you're just not valued as much. So that's kind of what I did. But sometimes I look at people like, we had Jamil Qureshi, I know, on the show a little while ago. And I look at Jamil and I think, what a great life he's got, because he never has to go anywhere. He does speak internationally, but he's got such a strong base in the UK as a market, and he's been able to build that. So if I had to do the same thing again, would I still do the international thing first? Yes, because it's part of me about who I am, global first. And it's very, it's not very, it's, you know, the whole globalization thing now is almost, we're seeing deglobalization, decoupling. But I'm very much at heart, I'm a globalist. So that's kind of where I want to go with it.
Fantastic, brilliant. A couple of things I want to pick up on. I love that alien advantage. And actually, it's really true that more often than not, if you are very established in your own marketplace, you will get much lower fees than if you go abroad. And okay, there is the fact that there's a bigger time scale and you've got to factor that in too. So of course you'll get paid more, but you are valued more. It's strange. And going back to the whole international, and you were talking about including travel or going to the territory, which sometimes you've done and sometimes you haven't done. I think it's a very good strategy to include travel. And I remember when I started working years ago in the bureau, and I don't know if he's still based there actually, because I have not worked with him for a while. Although I interviewed him, I should have asked him. I don't think he is. Martin Lindstrom was based in New Zealand, and that puts people off if they're in Europe, because they're thinking the airfare is huge. So he just put it into his fee. He said, this is my fee. And then, of course, if he's then coming to Europe and he's then got other events going on, he gains. And when I was working with Bo Lotto, the neuroscientist, and representing him, we had the same issue, because he was based half the time in Oxford, half the time in New York, and every now and then you would go somewhere else. And I said, listen, let's just do a blanket fee, and if you happen to be local, you gain, and if you're not, you might lose a bit. And it worked incredibly well. It works better with the higher fees, though, not so good if you're a lower fee. So that's brilliant. What does your speaking business consist of now then? So yes, you do keynotes, but I know you do virtual. What are the various products and services you offer?
So if we take this through the different product categories, we have keynotes. So those are virtual keynotes or in-person or hybrid keynotes now, and also hologram keynotes. That's something we've been doing more recently. So the keynote side, I would say, is the majority of my business, and that's where my focus is on. But after that, we have workshops. And so these are usually virtual workshops, although I do, when pre-pandemic, I did a lot of live. I did one big one for like McDonald's in Thailand, did a lot of stuff in Latin America, doing a lot of workshop based. I think I did one week in Ecuador. I did 4 workshops in a row, back to back. And these are full day workshops. And you're doing it in Quito, which is at the second highest capital in the world. So I was exhausted after doing 4 days of that. So it does require a certain different level of energy that keynotes don't. So virtual workshops. And then after that, we have my MC side, which actually came about during the pandemic. It's not a product I really did before. You and I, we do a lot of kind of interviewing. So we feel very comfortable, and, doing virtual was very comfortable for me with keynotes. And some clients just started coming to me, James, we don't want to hire like a big external speaker, but we do need someone to hold this whole thing together and be the voice. So it's quite the way that I do it, I script all of my own stuff. So they come to me almost as a mixture of being that face and being very comfortable doing virtual and being kind of unflappable, with also having the kind of scripting, writing skills and understanding the language of the industry. So understanding in terms of, if I'm emceeing a big artificial intelligence company event, like I did last week, I did two things with an AI company in the middle of the night, because it was for China, and I know the language in that world of AI and machine learning, and so I can have a conversation. We do like the fireside chats and the breakouts, and so I can talk with those CEOs at that level if I need to. So that's been a relatively new, and that's been a great thing. I've really enjoyed doing virtual emceeing, and probably will continue to do that after things start kind of going back to a bit more normality. And then the final part is online courses and memberships, and that's a bit of a strange one, is because I come from that world. When I lived in California, I was responsible for helping create about 30 online academies for different brands and different thought leaders. And so I know how that model works, online marketing, how it works. And so I decided when I was doing mine to do that. And so I have 2 online academies. One is called Speakers U, where I train other speakers on how to can do what I do, so they can build their speaking business. And then the other one is more recent, which is called Super Creativity U, which used to be called C School. And Super Creativity U is essentially the place where I'm not really selling direct to the public with those, but if I have a client who I'm speaking for, then often what I'll do is I'll create a course or give access to a membership program within that for all of their executives or the employees for a certain period of time. And all that lives within Super Creativity U. So those are my different products. And then the final thing, actually, which has not been a big thing this year or last year, which is retreats, live retreats. That's the thing we would normally do here. We would normally do about 10 creative retreats a year in California and New York, up in Woodstock, and Italy and France and Amsterdam and UK and Asia. But we haven't done any for the past 2 years. And I probably will start to do those again, but I'm not really in any particular rush to do this because they're a lot of work. You do live events as well, and bringing 30 people together for a week of quite an intensive kind of mastermind style retreat is a lot of work.
It sounds like a lot of work. I know that we're talking about maybe doing one together for speakers, and we will revisit that when we're ready. But yeah, so when we started talking about your speaking business, and you said that your first year you did 50 events, if I'm correct in saying, and that on top of that, you have the online, you have the membership, you have your podcast, you have your MC. I suppose the MCing would be part of the gigs, but there's so much more to your business than just the speaking part. So you're constantly out there. So in 3 years you have built so much. You've done so much. It's truly impressive. And what I love is the fact that you are able to offer clients a continuing learning experience. So it's not just that keynote. They've got that access to you as a membership or an online course, etc. That is absolutely invaluable. And of course, you've created once and you've done it, haven't you? You don't have to keep creating over and over again.
And sometimes, the nice thing about creating courses, sometimes, from a selling your, if your main thing is keynotes or speeches, for example, is I'm always up against 2 other really good speakers, pretty much always. And I always love to know who the other speakers are, and because I kind of secretly celebrate when that 100 grand speaker that I was up against and I get the gig. And even though they're a great speaker, because that's that competitive side of me, I guess. But sometimes when you're selling and you're being maybe compared in some ways, but usually at that level, it's not a kind of an apples and apples thing. It's an apples and oranges thing. So I'm trying to find ways to be distinctive from that other speaker, because they're going to be fantastic as well. If they book the other speaker, they're going to be amazing. I've no doubt about it. So what I will sometimes do is with a client, a prospective client, I will say, this is what I'm going to deliver. I'm going to tailor-made this keynote better than any other speaker you've ever had. So my whole thing is about tailor-making James Taylor, that speech to them, super customized. I go way beyond, I mentioned AI, but I do lots of other things as well. And in addition to my speech, it doesn't just end there, because what we can do is we can give all 1,000 members of your event access to my complimentary online course that goes along with this. Now, in the old days, we used to upsell to books. I don't have a book. I haven't published a book.
Yes.
The thing you always talk to write a book. So I created courses instead. And I would use courses as a way of dealing with pricing objections as well. And also for the audience, I'm up there on stage for 60 minutes or 45 minutes. There's only so much I can share in that time. And I know a lot of people, myself included, I actually quite like going back and returning to material and going a little bit deeper on things as well. And that's where online courses can be really phenomenal. So that's part of the reason for doing online courses. It's not so much as a front end sales thing to make money from online courses, but to add, as you say, add more depth to that experience for the client.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Adding more value. Tell me, this is the $60 million question. Where do your bookings come from?
Well, I'm going to say where they come from in 2021 as I'm doing them, because it has changed over the years. Because when I first started, I wasn't with any bureaus, no bureau partners. And I had a very arrogant thing right at the start of going, I'm not going to work with any bureaus. I'm just going to focus on direct to customer. Like that's going to be my thing and everything. And then I quickly realized that basically 75% of speaking gigs that pay fees over 15,000 are being done through bureaus. So that was a kind of stupid way of thinking about it at the start. So I've kind of changed my thinking over the years. But now I would say number one is SEO. Really boring, and we pay for SEO tools and we're doing lots of things around SEO. One of the reasons we do so much content is because of SEO, is for doing that. After that, it would have been PPC usually. We've kind of dialed back on the PPC recently because as we're doing this just now, we're in the summer period. So you tend to kind of dial back a little bit in the summer, then pick it back up again for the autumn. And then after that, it's going to be bureaus now. And I work with about 40 different bureau partners. And so there's business comes in from those different bureau partners. And then I would say after that, referrals from probably referrals is maybe a little bit more than that, but maybe referrals is a big thing. And probably 0.00001% comes from social media. I've never been able to, we've had some great guests on talking about social media, how their social media is getting them gigs. And we track everything like ridiculously. Everything is tracked in our CRMs. And very rarely do we see things that have come in because someone's first had contact with us or they've learned about me through Twitter or Facebook or even LinkedIn. It just doesn't. They might build a relationship after that and do some more exploring, but it doesn't come in from that way.
That's interesting because that's completely the opposite to Jamil's business, of course, because he does have the bureaus, not as many as you have there, but he does so well on LinkedIn. I can help you with LinkedIn if you want a bit of help on that. But
Jamil's personality, I think, works really well on LinkedIn because he's kind of got this. He's funny in that sense as well, and I think you kind of have to, push into your strengths and how you like to communicate. And he obviously likes being on LinkedIn. I don't particularly, this is probably streaming just now to LinkedIn, but
it's streaming to LinkedIn, say nice things.
Yeah. I go through stages of like, yeah, it's okay. But given I would rather just read a book. And I have to be dangerous, but no more.
Yeah, you have to do what you enjoy. So that's really fascinating. So SEO, PPC, bureaus, 40 bureaus. I'm going to come back to that. Referrals, I'm sure your referrals are higher up. I really do, because referrals is probably one of the best ones, isn't it, really? And then the social media thing. So there's some opportunities there, I think, on that, but you're busy enough. I want to talk to you about bureaus because it's not easy to get listed with a bureau. It's even harder once you are listed to actually get any business with a bureau. How have you managed to get listed with 40 bureaus? And I know you have active, ongoing and successful relationships with them. How have you succeeded in doing that?
Yeah, so a mixture of different things, really. I think, and probably the big caveat I have to place here is, even though I work with 40 bureaus, you're probably only going to find in an average year that 5 of those will give you any decent number of gigs. So it's not, they're all created equal. So this is the way that I did it. So I mentioned PPC early on. We ran a lot of PPC, but what I would do is, rather than book those dates myself or have a member of the team, look to book those dates on my behalf, I would actually end up channeling them to a bureau. So let's say I had an inquiry that came in and it was in Hong Kong. What I would do is if I didn't have a bureau that I work with in Hong Kong, I would reach out to the bureau and I'd say, hey, we've just received this inquiry from Standard Bank or whoever the client was, about booking me to speak at their conference. Would you like to handle it? Would you like to deal with it? And every bureau is going to go, yeah, absolutely. It's, it's landed.
They will, because of your fees. They will, because of your fee level.
Yeah.
So somebody with a lower fee, you might not get the same reaction, but also you've strategically chosen the right bureaus as well, because that's important too. So yeah, if you choose the right bureau, you're going in with a good fee and you're going in with a good client, as you've mentioned. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what we did is, it was almost like fishing, like throwing out lines and throwing out hooks, I would give 2 to 3 inquiries to each bureau over the course of maybe a year, because we were getting lots of inquiries all the time. And then I would sit back and I would watch, first of all, who could convert, because, you know, I don't want to give inquiries to people that can't actually sell well or can't convert me, or, and I'm going to say this in the very rare instance that this does happen, where they will try and then move the client from booking me to booking one of their exclusive speakers. It does happen, and I'm not going to say bureau.
Yeah.
It's not a very nice thing, and it's happened to me as well. And then the other thing I'm doing is I'm also watching to see if business starts coming back the other way, and so if I start getting inquiries from them, and then once you kind of do that process, you find who the good girls or the good guys are, and you go, actually, I enjoy working with them. Let's just kind of go deeper with that. And so for all of the bureaus we work with, we give them the same things. We give them all of our packs, our case studies. I'm always reaching out to them, like, what else can we do for you? If you've got showcases, if you've got other things going on, all that all the time. We do a monthly newsletter to all the agents, all these different bureaus that we work with. But there's a smaller grouping, I would say about 5 bureaus, that we have a much deeper relationship with. And also with some of those, I'm giving them, maybe the client has booked me for a conference, and I'm then having a conversation with the client at the after the event, at the debrief, and I'm suggesting maybe speakers. Oh, have you thought about, you know, you did this thing here, or have you thought about this would be a great speaker maybe for next year for your follow-up, if that's the avenue you're going down. Let me connect you again with, you know, Rebecca here at Big Speak, and she can have a conversation with you about that speaker, because I know that she does a lot of booking for her. So that's me referring business, but referring it to the bureau, not referring it to the speaker.
Fantastic. Love that. And actually, really another good strategy if you have an inquiry. So as you said, you had that inquiry for Hong Kong and you didn't have a relationship with the bureau, is to actually say to the client, do you ever work through a bureau? Do you have a preferred bureau? Because if they do, they're already set up. They've got the bureau set up as a supplier. They've already got a relationship, and they could introduce you to a bureau that you don't know. So that's also another good way to do it. So it's interesting that you've had to have that number of bureaus, 40 bureaus, in order to have 5 that are good. And partly that would be because you're so international. Whereas if somebody's focusing on one local market, you can't have 40 bureaus in one local market. Not that there probably are 40 decent bureaus in one local market, apart from maybe the US would be the exception. Fantastic. So listen, I've taken lots of your time. I have got a couple more questions I would like to ask you. Would you do anything differently if you had to start over?
Would I do anything differently?
Apart from having a rate card, maybe.
Yeah, rate card would be useful. You know, I might have actually spent even less time on social media, and gone old school. And I think maybe there's also a generational thing we're seeing here as well, where I'm noticing a lot of younger speakers just don't use the phone. And I'm happy to use the phone or jump on video calls and things with people as well, where they would be much happier, like just posting lots of content. And so that's kind of a thing that, you know, if I was to do the whole thing again, I might even go a little bit more hardcore on not being social media. And there's lots of great examples of other speakers. I'm always amazed that I was doing an event the other day with like this, I was the opening and they were the closing keynote speaker, and I was having a conversation, and this is like a really successful speaker, and they just don't do any social media, like nothing, because their thought leadership is so strong. They release a book every 3 years, and it's a brilliantly researched book. So they spend all their time researching their ideas and having conversations behind the scenes. It's all below the line. Nothing's above the line. It's all below the line. So if I was to do that, I would, you know, get an international phone plan with Skype, and, you know, just have calls, have conversations. I think it's almost, in some ways, it's a little bit harder now, because as a newer speaker, you don't get maybe as many referrals. So if we think about when you go and do a live event, you would do your live event, you'd come off stage, you're doing, you know, business cards, you know, and I was always told if you don't get 2 offers of people coming up to you at a gig to say, we'd like to bring you to speak at ours, or we've got a conference, you know, would you be interested in speaking at ours, then your speech probably isn't good enough. So that bit there, when you make the transition to the referral, I think that's much harder in a virtual space. And so there's some ways I think it's a harder thing for speakers to do, but I don't think I would do anything particularly different. I think it might be a little bit different now doing it in 2021, that I was think much a global speaker. We're seeing a deglobalization, a decoupling. So what I might possibly do is I might choose my side. I might either go the Western world, focus on that, or I might focus on China, Asia, Southeast Asia, and focus on those markets instead. I think we're going to see a stronger kind of line going down there, because the stories to tell are going to be different as well.
Fascinating, fantastic. A couple of things I want to pick up on. So for me, you're absolutely right. It's about conversations. It's about talking to people. And when I talk to speakers and I try to help them, social media for me is about attracting those people, to engage with them, to have conversations. It's not about putting a ton of content. It's about putting enough content to give you credibility to set up conversations. So totally agree with you. You've got to start talking to people, whether it's on Zoom or on the phone, always. And that's the only way you can build a relationship, is by talking. Absolutely. And then the other thing that you said about having 2 offers after you've come off stage, totally agree with you. If you haven't got somebody coming back to you and saying, I want to use you again, whether it's virtual, whether it's live, it's not good enough. And you can always be better, always. You need to keep working on it. Wonderful. So to finish,
actually, on that note, I'll tell you a very funny story. So that first gig that I ever booked, so I had a couple of months in order to write my speech. So I basically sold the speech before I'd ever written the speech.
Absolutely.
I just had a title and a subtitle, and I was like, okay, I've got a couple months to write. And so I still say this day in, day out, I had to get my reps up and figure out what worked. And the way that I did it is I went and gave, I think, 25 talks to Rotary clubs in Scotland, which is where I live, all local to me. And I remember doing those first few ones and trying material like a comedian, like, oh, that wasn't working. That gets a laugh. Oh, that gets a resonance with the audience. And I remember really strongly, I can tell you where it was. It was at the Invercars Hotel in Dundee. There was an audience of about 200 people. It was a Rotary Club meeting, like a Wednesday afternoon, where you get up and you do your 20 minutes. And I remember coming off the stage or doing my thing and getting 2 business cards from 2 people. People said, we'd like to book you to our conference. And I remember at that point going, I'm finally getting somewhere. My speech is finally starting to get, but that was probably 15 speeches in.
Absolutely. And that's how Jamil's built his business. He always says, the more you speak, but you've got to be good. Absolutely brilliant. So to finish, because we love tools, we love apps. I know you love them. So what's your go-to tool, your go-to app, your go-to software, whatever it happens to be in your speaking business that you could not live without?
So difficult. You've got just one tool.
No, you can give us more than one if you like. Well, go on, give us more than one. I'll let you off.
The heart of what we do is Entreport, which is a CRM. And that just kind of stores all the data. It allows us to send all the emails, to make our offers, to track everything that's happening as well. That's the core. But in terms of little really useful tools I use day in, day out, is one called BombBomb, which it's very simple. It just sits on my phone. And this is how I use it. It's basically a video email tool. So I always think that, us as speakers, usually we're very good at communicating verbally. That's how we like to communicate. And suddenly we have to start sending emails, like writing stuff. And it feels like a little bit jarring. I always feel you can say it better as a speaker if you speak it rather than write it. So BombBomb is basically made for us. BombBomb is a tool that allows me to film a little short video. Hey, John, thanks so much for, reaching out to me the other day. It would be great to come and speak at your event. And you send this as a little embedded video, essentially. It comes and it looks really good, and you can see all the clicks and things. So this is how I use it. I use it for cold outreach because it stands out in someone's inbox. In fact, you'll have something like this. Usually I'll have a little kind of thing like the name of the person, and I kind of do something like that, and it gets their attention, gets them opening and watching that video. I will also use it after I've done a call with a client and I want to summarize the conversation we've had, because maybe they're having to sell up in their organization. Maybe they're the executive director of a association, and they're going to have to go down to the committee to make a final decision. Because what can happen is I can send that video of me saying, great speaking today about me potentially coming speaking at your conference in October. So here's a quick recap. Here's why I'd be a great choice, ABC. and then send that to them. I'll then get a little notification saying that they've seen it and they've watched it. But then maybe a few weeks later, I will get a little ping again saying, oh, some people are opening and looking at that video again. I know that they're back in buy stage, because maybe that's the stage that the committee is now looking to make a decision. And then I can then reach back out to the client. Hey, just following up on you. Are you still thinking about, interest in booking me for this? Oh, funnily enough, we were just talking about you today because we're just making that decision this week. Boom, and you get the sale because you're relevant and you're on time. And so BombBomb is the tool that we use for that. And we use it for lots of other things. Like after, just like if I'm at an airport, I'll just do a little BombBomb thanking the client. Thank you so much for bringing me in to speak at your event. There's one thing I wanted to mention to you. We actually have an entire online program that would be great to give all of your people access to, so they can access even more training on this particular thing. Just click on the link below and I'll have my assistant send you the information about that as well. So that's how we use BombBomb.
So anybody listening in will now know why I twisted your arm to talk about your speaking business, because you do everything right. It's so cool. The CRM, thank you so much, because I think so many speakers do not have a CRM, and I don't know how they run their businesses without a CRM. I think their things will be falling through the cracks, things will be leaking through, they'll be losing stuff and missing stuff. And I love the BombBomb. I don't particularly like it in cold outreach. I've had it used on me in cold outreach, but the follow-up where you're doing that proposal and you're saying, let me give you a summary so it's in your words and you're doing it, is genius. The fact it tells you so you can then pick up with the client again is so cool. Thanking people, yes, wonderful, because people, and thank bureaus as well, because bureaus don't get thanked often enough and don't get enough Christmas presents. So all my bureau friends out there, that's okay. And that just not from you, no, but for you, but for other speakers, certain other speakers, they know who they are. And the whole upselling, they're not only you thanking, but you're selling something else. James, you are a true genius. So just remind people, if they want to book you to speak on Super Creativity, tell us where to go. And also, if somebody wants to grab all of the great knowledge as a speaker from your membership, tell us where to go.
So very simple. Just go to jamestaylor.me, TAYLOR.me, jamestaylor.me, for my speaking side or anything of thought leadership around creativity and AI. And if you are interested in actually getting training from me, and we've created lots of courses to help speakers, basically I can show you everything, how we do it, all behind the scenes stuff as well. We have loads of online courses, about 500 hours now of online course content there. Just go to speakersu.com, so the letter U, speakersu.com, and you can join our membership program there.
James, you've been fabulous. And a couple of comments before we disappear. We've got a Facebook user, sadly you haven't put your name, so I don't know who you are, who said, the great idea, re-asking what the previous keynote was paid, first time hearing it. They are a nice little gem there. Somebody else has said, so with you, read thank yous, it does my head in how infrequently people say thank you. That sounds like somebody who might be booking people there, I think. James, awesome, fantastic. I cannot thank you enough for that wonderful wisdom. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day in Siracusa.
Thank you, Maria. Have a great time, everyone.
See you next week, everybody. Thank you.